A dream without a deadline is like a ship without a rudder. It may float, but it has no direction. You can have the most vivid, inspiring, exciting vision for your future, but if you don't assign it a time frame, it simply remains an idea, not a goal. It's something you talk about, something you feel good imagining, but not something you act on. That's the problem with dreams that don't have a deadline. They don't create motion. They don't inspire urgency. They don't move you to take the first step because in your mind, there's always tomorrow. And we all know tomorrow has a way of turning into next week, next month, and someday, which usually turns into never. Think about it. People say things like, someday I'll start a business, or one day I'll get in shape, or I'd love to write a book. But someday and one day don't exist on the calendar. They're illusions, comfortable places to hide when you're not ready to commit. Without a deadline, a dream becomes an escape instead of a target. It becomes a fantasy instead of a plan. You dream it, you talk about it, but you never move toward it because you've never said when. You've never said, be this date, I will begin. Or, but this time next year, I will be here. A deadline does something powerful to the mind. It forces clarity. When you put a time frame on your dream, you have to think through the steps. You have to ask, what needs to happen first? What do I need to learn? Who do I need to talk to? A deadline invites structure. It doesn't just bring the dream into focus. It brings it into the realm of action. Without that deadline, you never get to those questions. You stay in the fog of inspiration, but you never arrive at the discipline of execution. You see, deadlines add weight. They make the dream real. When something has a deadline, it moves from the maybe category into the must. It becomes part of your priorities. Your brain starts to organize around it. You begin to notice opportunities that align with it. You feel a sense of responsibility, a sense of commitment, not just to the dream, but to the process. That's what makes deadlines so powerful. They turn feelings into focus and hope into hustle. People who never set deadlines often wonder why nothing changes. It's not that they're lazy or that their dreams aren't valid. It's that they haven't built the bridge between where they are and where they want to be. That bridge is a plan, and the foundation of every plan is time. You need a start date. You need a progress checkpoint. You need an end goal. When you establish those markers, even the biggest dream starts to feel doable because now it's something you can track, measure, and adjust along the way. Another reason dreams without deadlines fail is because they don't create accountability. When you have a deadline, you feel pressure in a good way. You feel responsible. You start telling people about it. You write it down. You plan your days around it. That kind of accountability sharpens your focus and strengthens your resolve. Without a deadline, you stay in a loop of wishing and wondering. With a deadline, you move into doing and becoming. So while dreaming is the starting point, it's not the finish line. Dreams light the fire, but deadlines build the furnace. They give your efforts a place to concentrate, a direction to aim, and a reason to begin today instead of waiting for the perfect moment. And once that date is on the calendar, everything changes. Because now the clock is ticking, and that dream has finally become a mission. When it comes to turning dreams into reality, structure is not just helpful. It's essential. That's what deadlines do. They bring structure to your vision. A dream on its own is exciting. It fuels the imagination. But without some framework, it remains untouchable, floating somewhere out there in the future. You need something to pull it down into the present, to give it form and direction. That's what a deadline does. It takes what's vague and makes it specific. It turns I want to do this into I will do this by this time. And that shift changes everything. When you set a deadline, you force yourself to translate your dream into a plan. You begin to ask the right questions. What do I need to do to make this happen? How much time do I have? What must I accomplish in the next 30 days, 60 days, 90 days? You begin to think in steps rather than fantasies. That's structure. You stop talking about what you hope will happen, and you start mapping out what must happen. You're no longer just visualizing the finish line. You're laying down the track. Structure brings clarity, and clarity creates momentum. You can't act on something you haven't defined. And the clearer the picture, the easier it is to commit. A deadline makes the picture sharper. It says, here's the target. Here's when it needs to be hit. Once you have that, you can create a timeline, break things into manageable tasks, and track your progress. Suddenly, the big dream that once felt overwhelming becomes something that can be tackled step by step. Deadlines also bring rhythm to your efforts. Without a deadline, you may work when you feel inspired, but that's not enough. Dreams aren't built in moments of inspiration alone. They're built in consistent, focused effort. A deadline gives you a schedule. It creates time blocks, milestones, and checkpoints. It gives you something to work toward each day. That regular rhythm creates progress, and progress keeps you engaged, motivated, and in motion. Structure also keeps distractions at bay. When you've got a dream floating out in the distance, it's easy to get pulled in 100 different directions. Everything feels important, but when your dream has a deadline attached to it, you know what matters most. You start saying no to things that don't align. You simplify. You focus. That kind of clarity is a gift in a world full of noise. A deadline also makes you resourceful. When the clock is ticking, you stop waiting for perfect conditions. You stop saying, I'll start when I'm ready, or I'll wait until I have more time. You begin to work with what you've got, where you are. That sense of urgency pushes you to find solutions, to move faster, to get creative. You tap into energy and resourcefulness that might never show up without the structure a deadline provides. And here's something important. Deadlines create results. Not just because they motivate you, but because they demand decisions. When you have a set timeline, you have to choose what matters. You can't do everything. You're forced to focus on what moves the needle. You let go of perfection and start aiming for progress. That kind of decision making over time builds confidence and momentum. Structure might not sound exciting, but it's the secret behind every great achievement. Dreams give you the why, but deadlines give you the how. And when you combine the two, when you take the fire of your vision and channel it through a system that keeps you moving, you give yourself a real shot at accomplishing something remarkable. Because once your dream has a structure, it's no longer out of reach. It's on the calendar, it's on the map, and it's in motion. Time pressure is one of the most powerful forces for sharpening your focus. When the clock is ticking, distractions start to fade into the background, and what matters most steps into the spotlight. That's what deadlines do. They introduce time pressure in a healthy, productive way. They create a sense of urgency that demands your attention and narrows your focus. Without that pressure, it's easy to drift. It's easy to spend time on things that don't move you forward. But when a deadline is looming, you suddenly see what's essential and what's not. We've all experienced it. A project that sat on the back burner for weeks suddenly becomes top priority the night before it's due. That's not magic. It's time pressure. It's the brain's way of saying, now is the time to act. The closer the deadline, the more the brain zones in. You stop overthinking, you stop hesitating, you move. And often, you're surprised at how much you can accomplish in a short amount of time when you're fully locked in. That's the power of focused urgency. When you're working toward a dream, it's easy to get lost in possibilities. There are so many directions you could go, so many tasks you could work on. Without a deadline, everything feels optional. You might spend your energy tweaking small details that don't really matter or jumping from idea to idea without finishing anything. But when you add a deadline to the mix, your options get filtered through a new lens. What has to be done now? That filtering effect is one of the most valuable gifts time pressure provides. It's also worth noting that time pressure doesn't just improve focus. It improves clarity. When you know there's a deadline, your mind naturally starts organizing tasks in order of importance. You begin to separate the urgent from the merely interesting. You stop chasing busy work and start pursuing results. You ask better questions. What's the highest leverage action I can take today? What will move me closer to the finish line this week? These are the kinds of questions that keep you on track and out of the weeds. Time pressure also helps you develop a sense of discipline. When you know you only have a limited window to get something done, you don't waste time. You plan your day more efficiently. You're more aware of how long tasks actually take. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start making use of every available one. That habit of acting with urgency, when repeated, becomes a mindset. And that mindset becomes a competitive edge. Let's talk about productivity. Most people think productivity is about doing more, faster. But real productivity is about doing the right things at the right time. And there's no better tool for enforcing that than a deadline. It sets the clock in motion and demands progress. When you give yourself a clear deadline, you're creating a natural checkpoint that helps you measure success. It forces you to ask, what have I done so far? What still needs doing? What must I prioritize next? Another benefit of time pressure is that it reduces the fear of starting. Many people get stuck because they want everything to be perfect before they begin. But when the deadline is approaching, perfectionism takes a back seat to execution. You begin to realize that done is better than perfect, and that taking action, even imperfect action, is better than standing still. That shift in thinking is crucial for anyone chasing a dream. Time pressure is not your enemy, it's your ally. When harnessed well, it becomes a catalyst for clarity, speed, and meaningful progress. It teaches you to focus, to act, and to finish. And in the pursuit of any worthwhile goal, that's exactly what you need. Because dreams don't happen someday. They happen when you create urgency today. Discipline and momentum are the unsung heroes of achieving anything meaningful. And one of the most effective ways to spark both is by setting a clear deadline. Without a deadline, discipline becomes optional and momentum struggles to exist. But once there's a time frame, a sense of urgency kicks in. You now have a reason to start, a reason to continue, and a reason to finish. Deadlines don't just sit on the calendar. They push you. They drive action. They demand commitment. Procrastination thrives in open-ended time. When there's no pressure to begin, the mind justifies delay. You'll tell yourself, I'll get to it tomorrow. Or, I'll start when things settle down. Or, I need to think about it a little more. And days turn into weeks, weeks into months. But introduce a deadline, and suddenly that fog begins to clear. The brain knows there's no more room for someday. It's now or never. That pressure creates the conditions for discipline to grow. Discipline doesn't come naturally to most people. It's built. It's a muscle that gets stronger every time you choose to show up, especially when you don't feel like it. And a deadline gives you the structure to practice that. You wake up with purpose. You begin to organize your day around what needs to get done. The distractions still show up, of course, but now you have a reason to push through them. That reason is the deadline. It's the internal voice that says, "This must be done. Let's go." And as discipline grows, something incredible happens: momentum. Momentum is a force that starts small but quickly becomes powerful. You take one step, then another, and soon you're moving faster than you thought possible. You feel progress. You see results. You get addicted to completion. And the best part, momentum feeds discipline. The more progress you make, the more motivated you feel to stay on track. It becomes a cycle. But none of this can happen without that initial spark. And that spark is often a deadline. Deadlines break inertia. They stop the cycle of overthinking and underdoing. Instead of talking about what you could do, you start doing what you must do. That subtle shift in mindset, from optional to necessary, is what helps people break through the walls of inaction. Once you take that first action, even if it's small, the resistance starts to fade. You don't need massive effort every day. You need consistent effort. And consistency is what deadlines help create. Deadlines also add accountability to your process. When you know there's a point where something needs to be finished, you're more likely to track your progress, measure your actions, and make adjustments. Without that pressure, you might work hard for a few days, then slip back into old habits. But when there's a line in the sand, a date you've committed to, you're more aware of how your daily choices affect the outcome. That awareness strengthens discipline because you understand the cost of delay. Momentum makes even hard tasks feel lighter. When you've been working consistently toward a goal with a set timeline, the resistance you once felt starts to shrink. You stop second-guessing yourself. You stop stalling. You move. Every task completed builds confidence. Every small win becomes proof that you're on the right path. And each day you keep that momentum going, the finish line gets closer and more real. Deadlines don't eliminate distractions or obstacles, but they do make it easier to overcome them. They give your efforts a structure, a rhythm, and a reason. They're a reminder that time is passing, and that if you don't take control of it, it will pass without progress. Discipline without a deadline lacks direction. Momentum without a target loses force. But put a deadline in place, and both begin to work in harmony. They keep you moving, even on the tough days. They keep you sharp. They keep your dream alive through consistent, focused action. One of the biggest mistakes people make with their dreams is keeping them too large and too vague. I want to be successful. I want to be rich. I want to be fit. These statements may sound good, but without definition, they carry no real power. The path from dream to reality begins when you break that big idea down into small, manageable steps. And that process begins the moment you attach a deadline. A deadline forces you to segment your dream into time-bound phases. It pushes you to ask, what can I do this month, this week, today? That's where real progress starts. Dreams without structure often feel overwhelming. If the goal seems too far away or too big, your mind doesn't know where to begin. You become paralyzed by possibility. But when you break that goal into bite-sized actions with specific deadlines, it becomes less intimidating. Suddenly, instead of trying to start a business, you're researching product ideas this week, building a simple website next week, and opening your first sales channel by the end of the month. Now, you're not just dreaming, you're executing. A deadline helps you reverse engineer your dream. You begin at the end, asking yourself, if I want to accomplish this by that date, what needs to happen between now and then? That backward planning is where clarity is born. You map out the key milestones, you prioritize tasks, and you set mini deadlines that keep you accountable along the way. With each step, the dream becomes more real. Because you're no longer just thinking about the outcome. You're building the system that makes it inevitable. This method also gives you momentum. Small steps are powerful because they're achievable. When you complete one, you feel successful, even if it's minor. That feeling creates a snowball effect. You finish one task and want to move on to the next. The win might be small, but the psychology behind it is huge. Progress feels good, and when you make consistent progress, you begin to believe the bigger dream is possible. That belief becomes motivation, and motivation drives further action. Another benefit of breaking your dream down into actionable steps is that it keeps you from getting stuck in the perfection trap. When all you can see is the final result, you might hesitate to start because you don't know how to do everything. But you don't need to know everything on day one. You just need to know the next step and take it. That's what deadlines help with. They say, this piece needs to be done by Friday. Don't worry about next month. Just hit this target. That's focus. That's productivity. Also, breaking your dream into pieces allows for flexibility. Life is unpredictable. Setbacks happen. But when you have your goal broken into segments, you can adjust as needed without losing sight of the end game. If something takes longer than expected, you adapt. If one approach doesn't work, you try another. You're no longer locked into an all or nothing mindset. You're playing the long game, one move at a time. That's how real success is built. And let's not forget how this approach strengthens your mindset. When you begin accomplishing steps towards your dream, especially with deadlines attached, you start to develop a powerful habit, the habit of execution. You stop waiting for the perfect moment or the right mood. You build trust in yourself because you're proving over and over again that you can follow through. That confidence bleeds into every area of life. You become more decisive, more focused, and more resilient. Every dream becomes achievable when it's broken down into actionable steps tied to deadlines. This is how bridges are built, one beam at a time. This is how books are written, one page at a time. This is how wealth is built, one decision at a time. The dream may be big, but the journey is always made up of small, intentional, consistent actions. When you set deadlines for those actions, the path appears, the fog lifts, and progress becomes inevitable. Decision-making is one of the most critical skills in achieving any goal, and deadlines are the catalyst that force decisions to be made. When a dream is left open-ended, it becomes easy to postpone action. You say to yourself, I'll figure it out later, or there's still time. But the truth is, the absence of a deadline breeds indecision. You wait, you overthink, and you talk yourself in and out of things a dozen times without ever making a move. A deadline ends that cycle. It draws a line in the sand and says, decide now. Deadlines bring urgency, and urgency sharpens the mind. You don't have time to chase every possibility or explore every path forever. You have to choose. And in choosing, you begin moving forward. That forward motion is where momentum and clarity are found. You stop worrying about making the perfect decision and start focusing on making progress. And here's the truth. Progress often reveals what perfection never could. You learn by doing, by moving, by adjusting, not by sitting on the sidelines waiting for certainty. When you set a deadline, you reduce the number of options you allow yourself to entertain endlessly. You no longer have the luxury of maybe or I'll think about it. You start filtering your choices through a more practical lens. What can I commit to right now? What must happen to meet this timeline? That pressure might seem uncomfortable at first, but it's exactly what's needed to stop floating in the realm of possibilities and start operating in the world of execution. Every dream requires dozens, if not hundreds, of decisions along the way. Some are big, most are small, but they all matter. And each one either moves you closer to the goal or further from it. Deadlines force those decisions to come quicker. You stop analyzing every angle and start trusting your instincts and your strategy. You begin to act with confidence because you know time is limited and indecision is costly. Deadlines also help you overcome fear-based hesitation. Many people delay making decisions because they're afraid of choosing the wrong thing. But what they fail to realize is that inaction is also a decision, and often the worst one. By not choosing, you're choosing to stay stuck. A deadline forces you to make peace with imperfection and accept that some progress is better than none. It gives you permission to learn along the way instead of needing to have everything figured out in advance. Think of successful people. They're not just dreamers, they're decisive. They don't wait forever to act. They gather enough information, make the best choice they can, and then move forward with purpose. If it doesn't work, they adjust. But they don't freeze. They don't stall out in the planning phase. They let the deadline guide their actions and trust that momentum will carry them forward. There's also a powerful mental shift that happens when you start making timely decisions. You build confidence. Every time you make a decision and follow through, you're reinforcing the belief that you are in control of your life. That belief compounds. It spills into every area, from your work to your relationships to your finances. You stop seeing yourself as someone who waits and start seeing yourself as someone who leads. Deadlines create accountability, and accountability breeds commitment. When you know a decision has to be made by Friday, you start taking it seriously. You prepare. You evaluate options with a focused mind. You stop putting it off. And when that decision is made, you feel the shift immediately. The weight of indecision lifts, and the energy that was tied up in overthinking is now released into action. That's how momentum builds, one decision at a time. And that momentum, powered by clear deadlines, is what transforms ordinary intentions into extraordinary results. Dreams are the starting point, but deadlines are what bring them to life. Without a deadline, a dream floats in uncertainty, unreachable, undefined, and easily delayed. But when you set a clear timeline, you create urgency, focus, structure, discipline, and forward motion. You start breaking your dream into steps. You make faster and better decisions, and you begin to build real momentum. The clock becomes your partner, not your enemy. Because once you give your dream a deadline, it stops being just something you wish for and starts becoming something you work for, plan for, and achieve.